Hello and welcome to Film Companion South. Today we're doing an Ask BR on 2.0. A lot of people have asked me, should we not appreciate the fact that such a movie has been made in Tamil? Why do we want to keep criticizing this film? I would say that's two things, Stacey. Should Shankar be appreciated for attempting this film? Absolutely yes. If I were to give that rating, that would be a 5 on 5. But I think reviews also reflect how the rest of the film takes place, and that's why we have some of these questions here. So let's go to the first one by Surya Dhanapati. Do you feel the sound mixing was too overpowering, where it kind of overshadowed, it overshadowed Rahman's BGM. Okay, I had the other problem. I thought it was overshadowed by the BGM because one of the things, if you notice this Film Company in South interview that Raisul Pokati did, he talked about this innovative sound design that he did for this dying bird, that little chick, the sparrow chick that falls from its nest and kind of gives its last breath. He talked a lot about that, but somehow that scene, there was some additional music to it, and it seemed like a lot of pathos was added to it, which was already there in the sound design. So I thought maybe that was the opposite thing that happened. But was the sound mixing too overpowering? No, I don't think so, because the rest of this time, I think this is less a movie about the background score than the sound design, I would feel, because when you're having these big set pieces and all that, you want to feel the reality of these imaginary visuals that are being created. How do you make them real? That's by the sound, and that's why the sound is very important in these films. Raghav Rishikeshan asked, do you think that Shankar is going for extravaganza and sacrificing the script? We saw that with I and 2.0. Do you see Indian 2 being like Mudal 1? I don't know about Indian 2 being like Mudal 1, but if you ask, Shankar has always been about extravaganza. It's always about giving the biggest bang for your buck. He wants you to have a really great time at the movies with all these great visuals. So it's never been about just the script alone. He builds that extravaganza into a script. But where I would say that it's been going a little off is that I think earlier the emotional connect was really good in his scripts. You kind of felt a lot of you felt for the characters in Mudalwani. But here the movies become colder, and I think you don't really feel for these characters. The emotional connect is not there. I think that's something that's gone missing in his films. There's a question there reflecting on that. Hari Rao says, when we look at superhero or sci-fi movies made by Hollywood, we don't look at the emotional connect. However, it's still expected from our sci-fi movies. Are we guilty of bias? I don't think we look at empty special effects movies from Hollywood and go, oh, it's so great. You might like the particular scene or something like that. But unless, whether it's Fast or Furious, or that's not a sci-fi movie, but I'm saying like a pure action movie, Fast and Furious, you connect to it because you are invested in whatever these people are doing. You're invested in their interpersonal relationships. That is all that one is asking for, not some huge, I should start crying at the end of the movie. It's not like that. But I think, that level of emotional connect, meaning that you care about what these characters are doing, that's what, one expects, and that wasn't kind of there. RD says, is 3D technology the main protagonist of the movie? Do you think the movie would have stood without it? We had a very good interview with Nirav Shah done here recently, and he said that this movie would not work in 3D because when you shoot in 3D, the 2D version becomes kind of flat. So I think that kind of, answers this question. Would the movie have stood without it? I don't know, because I haven't seen. I'm really curious to see the 2D version and to see how the big special effects scenes are playing in 2D. But in general, I've noticed that people are liking the 3D. So I think that's what's the big draw on this film. And I really think that's the big attraction of this film, because the other thing is also that because they've shot it with 3D cameras and not processed it into 3D after the movie's been completed, the 3D is very clean. The visuals are very clean. They're very bright. And that's a rarity. And I think that's what people are responding to a lot. Prabhu says, no songs or visuals in 2.0, boon or bane for the movie. I actually like Shankar's song picturizations. I like that go for broke thing that he does. Not every one of them, but there are some really nice song sequences that he's done. And see, the thing is with songs, we say songs are bad only if the situation leading up to the song and the situation that happens after the song don't fit the song in between. So as long as there is a lead up to the song and the song happens and there is a lead in to the next scene, like in a fairly organic manner, I don't think any kind of movie, sci-fi, if they make an Indian Western, whatever it is, every movie can have songs. It doesn't mean it has to have. But the trick is to write the screenplay in such a way that this thing happens. The lead into the song and the lead out from the song should be organic. And had they found a method like this, I think it would have been interesting to see what Shankar would have done. I would have really liked to have seen a song sequence for Rasali, that song. It's a great song, and I would have loved to see what Shankar would have done with it. Rajesh Rajendran asks why there is no scene where the Pakshirajan character talks directly to the people, like Niralgal Ravi scene in Indian, Nehru Stadium scene in Onion. I actually have the same question as well, because I think given the fact that he's a powerful villain, more importantly, he stands for a very powerful cause. So I think the film would have really benefited if he had given a very powerful statement about what he's standing for. Yes, the method he was going about his mission was wrong, but he still stood for a very, very valid and important thing. And I think that's why it's very it's interesting that Shankar felt that he just kind of did not have that speech, because we have had it in earlier films and it was very effective. Mark Antony says this is one of the very few films in Tamil in which both the protagonist and antagonist were given different shades. It even went to the extent of having the antagonist as soul, but it doesn't seem to work for you. Since it's a Rajini movie, you want it to be simple. Not at all. No, I don't want a simple Rajini movie, or I don't want a very complicated Rajini movie. That depends on what the director and the screenwriter are doing. So, as long as the movie does what it sets out to do. Now, the thing is, when you set Rajnikanth as the hero, it becomes very difficult to have a really powerful villain opposite him. That is one of my main problems with the film. Now, actually, the Akshay Kumar villain is the typical Shankar hero, right? We've talked about this. I mean, I wrote about this. Several other people have pointed it out. Now, when you make that character the hero, it's a different thing because you're rooting for that person. But when making the character that villain and somebody who has to be destroyed, you're kind of taking away a lot of the good things that person is standing for. One or two speeches here and there doesn't matter. So I think that's what the real problem is. The fact that the antagonist has soul and things like that. That's what I'm trying to talk about. Not the fact that I want this to be a very simple movie. It actually is a much more complicated movie than it appears to be, because several things that have been done here in the writing of the film, not just in the special effects, they're very interesting in terms of what our good versus evil movies usually are. So that's, I think it's a failure of some of the writing that these things don't come across very well. Ilango Rangaraj says, just because you call it aura, positive and negative energy and fifth force, do we have to accept it as a sci-fi film? All I can see is ghosts trying to get revenge for birds. I agree with you in some way, because see, sci-fi is not just putting, setting a movie in the future, or putting, like having things like robots or, androids or whatever it is. Sci-fi is a kind of a philosophy, and you can even have, very, very simply done sci-fi films. So the thing is, I don't think this film, I think it's a very interesting, what they call about aura, or the positive negative energy. We have it in our ghost stories as what we'd call a Tiya Sakti or something like that. So I don't think this film is really a sci-fi film in that sense of the word. Yes, it has sci-fi elements. But is it a sci-fi film? I would kind of argue against that. Gautam Nidarshanan says, you have questioned filmmakers about involving writers in the process of filmmaking very often. I consider writer Jeyamohan as one of the sensible person who would converse a lot. I came across an interview of him. Yes, I would love to have a chat with Jeyamohan about how he contributed to this film and what was, his whole thing about it. Because there's another question here that I want to address. Harishankar Sheshakumar, in a question that came to us from Facebook, says 2.0 writing was far better compared to his director Shankar struck a chord with writer Jeyamohan, considering that he is now part of his next film Indian 2. Would this combo revive the same magic as Shankar Sujata? Your thoughts? See, it's very tough to say, See, unless Shankar tomorrow comes and says, this is exactly what happened with Sujata and these are the things that he contributed, it's very difficult to say, did Sujata contribute ideas? Did he write the whole screenplay? Now, there may be things credited to people in a movie, but whether they actually did it is another matter, right? I'm not taking anything away from Sujata, but every director who has a big vision molds the screenplay according to their vision. So it's very difficult to see the balance of how much of it is Sujata and how much of it is Shankar. There is no doubt DNA of both these people, but what is the percentage of Sujata DNA and what is the percentage of Shankar DNA? Now, unless we know that for sure, it's very difficult to kind of say, think. But yes, one of the things we can say is that the movies in which Sujata was involved are definitely the more humanistic kind of Shankar films, where despite all the bigness, there was still a kind of human element. So maybe there's a clue there. As for Jeyamohan and Indian 2, we'll have to wait and see, because Jeyamohan is a very talented writer, but is writing for the screen is again a very different thing, and it would be interesting to see how Jeyamohan does that. TJ says that you say that Shankar repeated certain structures from his earlier films, but doesn't that appeal to all commercial directors? Definitely. See, for instance, the best example is Hitchcock, right? He's always making movies about an innocent man who's accused of a crime, and he goes on the run, and then he proves that he's innocent. That's the basic structure of all his films. But the screenplay is still different from film to film. Here, Shankar follows a very similar screenplay format in all his films. So you have like people getting murdered. Then the villain makes an appearance, or the hero as the villain makes an appearance, and in the second half you get this big logical reason for why these murders are happening. Now if you're just going to keep changing the reason for the murders happening and the reason the murderer is committing these murders, that's not really the same thing as what Hitchcock did, for instance, earlier, because having a theme is one thing, but having the same screenplay structure and kind of just changing one small element in that becomes a little tiresome, which is why I think I got really tiresome for me, because the creativity was not in the screenplay so much as how gruesome can the next murder be. That's what happened in I, and that was where all the creativity seemed to be going. So that was what I was objecting to. Prithviraj says, instead of phones, Shankar could have used birds directly. Like Planet of the Apes, Shankar could have taken Planet of Birds with Birdman as the lead. There is so much of possibility. Why Shankar used ghosts? Science is missing in sci-fi. I think we kind of touched on this earlier. But then, could have is a strange word to use when you're talking about a movie, because yes, of course, every time we see a movie and the movie we don't really get as involved as we should be, our mind naturally has a counter reason, as in, why is this scene not working? We kind of manufacture a reason as to why it's not working. If it's working, we don't care, because then we're going with the movie. But if we feel something is not working, we manufacture a reason to kind of say why it's not working. Now, as long as this is close to the film, that's fine, because, okay, this character should have actually done this, that's different. But something as drastically different as this, it's like basically saying, shouldn't you have made a different movie altogether? So I don't know, that's a very, different way of coming across this, and maybe we should just talk about screenwriting like this in a very different episode. Rajarajan VS says, villain gets flashback and social message is delivered through him. Messenger villain is vanquished by hero. Intriguing angle, many such ideas exist. Flaws apart, screenwriter Shankar is definitely rising after falling flat in I. What is your say? Definitely. This is a much better movie than I. And in fact, I think I wish this film could have been written better. I'm like, there are so many interesting things in this movie. And I was just basically somebody taking revenge, right? Here you have this whole inversion of the villain becoming the hero kind of thing in other Shankar movies. So the person that would have been the hero in the other Shankar movies is now the villain, that kind of a thing. There are so many interesting inversions and subversions happening here. And I think that's when the writing kind of really needs to hold you, especially in the first half, because the second half is basically, I think everybody agrees that the second half is great fun. I don't think anybody can say they did not enjoy it. It was just so much fun, especially on the big screen. But it's the first half, the build up, when it happens, I think that's when you kind of want all these interesting angles to be addressed better. Sri Ramanan says, do you think that Shankar might have opted for a simple screenplay because of the complex visual effects so that it does not confuse the audience? I don't think so. I don't think this complexity of the visual effects has anything to do with the simplicity of the screenplay. The screenplay is about how things move on, like from character to character. And when you're talking about a simple screenplay or a complex screenplay, it's about how characters are taken from one scene to another. VFX is beyond that. It doesn't mean that there are so many movies with visual effects that have very complicated screenplays. There are many that have very simple screenplays. The simplicity or complexity of a screenplay does not have anything to do with the goodness or badness of the movie. If it's a very simple screenplay and if it's a good screenplay, I don't think anybody would have a problem. So those are the questions we got for 2.0. Thank you for sending them across. This is definitely a film that needs to be talked about, discussed, not just because, let's leave the visual effects aside, right? Like, there's so many interesting things in terms of that are happening conceptually in this film, and I think that's why some of us want this to be a better film, but which is not to say that we didn't enjoy what is out there. It's just that it should have been better. That's what my thing is. Thank you for watching. We'll be back with our next Ask VR soon, and do subscribe to Film Companion South.